These are two whiskeys that I will likely never own a bottle of. And I'm just happy to get to try them. Let's talk about which of these is better. Hey guys, welcome back to Whiskey on the West Coast. My name is Matt, and today I'm bringing you another first impression session. I did another virtual online tasting with Kensington Wine Market. Actually, I caught up on one that I missed due to work, I believe. Kensington Wine Market does a fantastic job with their online tastings. I'm a huge fan, and they put on a blinded by Campbeltown blind tasting where it was all Campbeltown whiskeys, all blind. I wanted to bring you thoughts on two whiskeys that I will never, undoubtedly, own a bottle of because they're just so hard to get. There is so much FOMO surrounding these two whiskeys, and I'm just happy to get a chance to try these. So these are going to be my first impressions and probably my last impressions of these two whiskeys. I am going to be tasting for you the Springbank 10-year-old PX, Pedro Jimenez release. There's 55% alcohol. It spent 7 years in ex-bourbon barrels, 3 years in a fresh Spanish oak Pedro Jimenez hogshead. So again, really interesting bottle there. 10,800 bottles were made of that particular whiskey, bottled at 55%. Again, lots of FOMO surrounding that one because it's the first in a long series of what I believe are just wine cask finished Springbanks. Other sample is going to be the Longrow 11-year-old, Longrow Red, 11-year-old Tawny Port cask. And this bottle here, 7 years again, bourbon barrel. Then it was moved into a first fill Tawny Port cask for 4 years, bottled at 57.5% alcohol. This whiskey is going to be around 50 ppm for Longrow Spirit. That's usually the spec. I didn't mention Springbank is usually 12 to 15. And this bottle here, the Longrow Red, there was only 8,400 bottles made. So again, I'm going to give you my thoughts. I'm not going to review these because this is a first impression session. Wouldn't be fair. But I will tell you which of these bottles, if I ever had the opportunity and could afford it, I would go ahead and purchase. Let's start with the less peated whiskey here. It's the Springbank 10-year-old PX. As I mentioned, 7 years in a bourbon barrel. 3 years in a fresh Spanish Pedro Jimenez hogshead. Oh man, 55% alcohol, so it's not the typical 46 you see from Springbank. These are going to be non-chill filtered, natural color. Like if it's Springbank, I don't even think I need to say that, but that's what they are. And on the nose, one thing that jumps out at me every time I stick my nose in this glass, and that is Coca-Cola gummies, Coke bottle gummies. From the corner store, used to be 5-cent gummies. I'm sure they're probably 25-cent gummies now with inflation. I don't know. Seriously, cola. Like, if I was to say it was, you know what, flat Pepsi. It's sweet Coca-Cola. It's not more bitter like the actual brand Coca-Cola. Yeah, flat Pepsi Coke. Wow. But there's more to it. There's raisin, there's fig, there's red fruits. It's syrupy. Most certainly it's syrupy. It's PX, so I mean, we know what we were in for here. Yeah. Some eucalyptus, wood varnish, and like furniture polish. One thing I do note that this nose could be so many other whiskeys. This could be an Adelphi independently bottled whiskey that's just slathered in sherry. They're known for what they do with sherry casks. It could easily just be like a Blair Athol sherry cask from Adelphi. Nothing that's screaming Springbank in this. Let's try the palate. So raisins, figs, big sherry syrup, spices. It's like boozy fruitcake. This is a sherry bomb. Now, there's some tobacco in there too, but so much sherry. It's so sweet. Another sip. Again, that Coca-Cola, those Coca-Cola candies show up. Very little pepper prickle, like the alcohol bite's not much. It's like chewing leather. Yeah, really leathery. Some cinnamon, and a touch drying. Yeah. On the finish, leather, oak, smoke. The finish is fine. It's less expressive than the rest of the attributes on this whiskey. The nose and the palate are certainly more enjoyable than the finish, but the only place I pick up Springbank funk is in the palate. That's the only place that this is really profiling a Springbank for me. Even the finish, it could be any moderately peated Sherry Cask whiskey, like that's got a really slathered in PX. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's yeah, I wish there was more Springbank DNA in this. That's what I wish this was. If this had the Springbank DNA in spades and had this sherry overcoat, wow. Yeah, that would be something. But I've got some further thoughts on that, and I got another whiskey to try. So let's jump to the Longrow. Let's address the Longrow Red. Longrow Red series, lots of fans. This is the 11-year-old Tawny Port cask. It was, again, 7 years in a bourbon barrel, much like the Springbank 10 PX, but then it was moved over to a fresh Tawny Port cask for 4 years. 57.5%, 8,400 bottles. And again, I did this tasting blind. The only thing I knew about the tasting was that it was going to be all Campbeltown whiskeys and that the Springbank 10 PX was going to be one of the samples. That was it. And so I was able to pick out the Springbank 10 PX immediately because, well, what else could that have been? However, I didn't know necessarily that this was the Longrow 11-year-old Tawny Port, but I definitely knew it was a Longrow. And that's because right away, it screams Longrow with that cold smoke. Yeah. And it's like this heavy Springbank peat. But it's slathered in this port, this Tawny Port overcoat. So you get chocolate raisin like Glossettes. You get a sweet barbecue sauce. Yeah, it's juicy yet savory. So again, that kind of like barbecued meats, but with that really sweet sauce on it. Someone on the tasting mentioned cedar, and when I went back for the nose after thinking cedar, my mind went to cedar wood chips in a smoker. So I've used cedar in the past to smoke sockeye salmon. I'm a fisherman. I live on the West Coast. No surprise there. So definitely. And I mean, even the smell laced with that salmon that's smoking, usually you have some sort of like sweet glaze or there's some sort of marinade you've used. Yeah, no, get that vibe completely. And some smoky maple glazed bacon. It's not the most complex nose because, I mean, there's a lot of different distilleries that do this sweet and peat combination with sherry. And sorry, this isn't sherry, but profiles similarly port. Yeah, but it's, again, really popular because it's really enjoyable. Let's take a sip. So that maple smoked bacon carries over to the palate. Hefty peat. Yeah, lovely peat. But again, it's more that like cold smoked. It's like, it's deep and earthy and almost like dark. It's, some people see colors or like taste colors. And if I had to like associate a color with it, it's dark. It's like this dark brown. Sweet barbecue sauce again. It's meaty. There's stewed fruits. There's raspberries. Yeah, red fruits. Man. Raisins. Yeah, raisins, but raspberries very, very specifically. It's just slathered in this port, much like the 10PX was slathered in the Pedro Jimenez. It really works with the heavy peat though. That extra element makes it more interesting and more multi-dimensional than the 10PX was. Not saying 10PX isn't great, but I'm enjoying this facet of it, and it's very Moorish. I want to take another sip right away. It's, yeah, really enjoyable. All the things I said, but leather and smoke on the finish for forever, really long. The finish is what really gives this, I'm gonna give it away here. The finish gives us a leg up on this Springbank 10PX for sure. Big billowing wafting smoke, still sweet. The raisin is still there. Yeah, that's really nice. I'm really enjoying that. And it's all rather academic because, again, I'm likely to never own one of these bottles, but if I had the chance, I would go with the Longrow Red 11-year-old Tawny Port cask. It's a really enjoyable profile. It's been executed very well. And I just find the finish is a lot more robust, and there's more Campbeltown funk character throughout it, throughout the nose, the palate, and the finish. I can see the Campbeltown DNA in it, not so much on the Springbank 10PX. Also on top of that, I don't know, I mean, I know, I do know, people are going absolutely gaga for the Springbank 10PX, and that's probably because it's part of this new series of wine cask, I guess, double matured whiskeys from Springbank. And so I've seen ridiculous prices like 400 euros bandied about for that. Yeah, I'd never pay that for this whiskey. That would just be a shame when there's so much other good whiskey you could buy. And I don't think this Longrow Red is going for nearly the same sum of money. So if you're a bit bougie and price is no option for you, just go ahead and buy the Longrow 11 Red Tawny Port cask instead of the Springbank 10PX, unless you're buying them to flip in the future for more money. Because I'm digging this whiskey. This is nice. Well, guys, we're about that time. Thank you once again for joining me on Whiskey on the West Coast. If you had a choice between these two whiskeys, which one would you choose? It's a tough call, but I want to know which one you'd pick and why. Thank you once again for joining me. If you can go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. Go ahead and click that like button. It really helps with the metrics and for getting the videos out to more people. Comment down below anything else that's on your mind. And I really hope you come back for more in the future. Until next time from the West Coast, Sláinte.